towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. We could just stick with towards the one and say that covers all the themes that everybody brought up today, all the questions, all the curiosities, all the struggles, all the confusions, all the desires, all towards the one. And if we look at just that phrase, it points toward some of the details of the questions and themes that were brought up so far in our conversation, that is so much about navigating the relationship between the infinite, all inclusive divine, the soul, and the world, the multiplicity, and all of the details of life, the responsibilities, the struggles, the complications, or complexities, maybe not complications, complexities. You know what I mean. Towards the one, it tells you which way you want to go and also tells you that you're not there yet. And in Sufism, we understand that that's not true, but it is our experience. It's not true, but it is our experience. It's all the one. There's never been any separation or distinction. There's never been a splintering off or um, a disconnect, but we experience the splintered disconnect through most of our lives. I'm sorry, through most of our lives of limitation in the world, in a body, in our human form, with our human personalities and experiences. So we do both. And, those of you who hang out with me a lot, you can just tune out or go, I don't know what you do, play Sudoku or solitaire or something, because you're going to be so bored. I say the same things all the time because they're always relevant. And maybe um, at some point they click, at some point they just settle into place and we go like, oh, I get it. I've heard it a million times and I didn't get it. And now I get it. Murshid, Piro Murshid Inayat Khan, my Sufi hero, and maybe yours, use the symbol of the cross to indicate the essence of the Sufi path. That is a straight vertical line and a straight horizontal line that intersect. And the straight vertical line represents our connection with the divine. That is our ultimate reality. There is no separation. We are the expressions of the divine without distinction. The horizontal line represents life in the world, that is on this plane of relationality. I don't think that's a word, but I think you know what I mean. Relationality. That's the ways that we interact with all the details of life, with our humanness, and that includes our relationality in our own bodies and our own beings and our personalities and the longings of our hearts and the experiences, the sensations of the physical body. All of our sensory organs are the activity of the mind that includes from the imagination to the thought to the concentration to the contemplation to the meditation. It includes all of the facets of our humanness. Now, we tend to both of these things simultaneously. It feels like we tend to them alternately, that we go, well, in which moments of our lives are we conscious of tending to that vertical divine resonance, attunement to source? And in what moments do we completely forget about that and believe, if for an instant or if for days at a time, that all there is the struggle and strife of everyday life? So we bounce between them. That's our conscious experience. That's what our minds think we're doing. We're bouncing between them. Piro Murshid Khan says, we're not, he doesn't say this is my paraphrase. He says something like, we're doing both. And it is the Sufis' task to do both all the time, simultaneously, and to be conscious of the fact that we're doing both, to tend to both intentionally. And that requires an expanded awareness. It requires wisdom. It requires an intelligence. I don't think that's a good word for it. Um, Feels like a good word for it right now. An intelligence that is able to welcome both perspectives simultaneously. There are some examples that Murshid gives in his teachings about tending to God, to the soul, to prayer, doing dhikr or zikr is how he said it and wrote it, zikr, so that in the moments that that's not the center of our intentional direction, it continues to keep us company. That we do our intentional, just focused practice, spiritual practice for some period of time every day, and then it keeps us company. It keeps us in rhythm. It keeps us in that atmosphere as a living vibration through the moments of our lives when we're not consciously tending to it, or at least not as a single pointed focus. I think it's interesting that in the way that phrase was brought up during the check-ins, the phrase was, it was about the physical material life versus the soul and the connection to the divine. That makes it sound like a battle. That makes it sound like a fight. That they're pitted against each other. And I would say that the Sufi path is not about pitting them against each other. It's about harmonizing them. It's tending to both simultaneously and noticing that there is no distinction. What happens then? What happens when we tend to our prayer life and somehow while we're sitting in meditation or we're reciting a wazifa or we're doing some like specific concentration, that some thoughts about everyday life keep us company, that some sensations of the physical body, a hunger, an itch, an ache, a discomfort assert themselves, and we're irritated and we're like, leave me alone, I'm praying. Like, no, we get to include that. Go, yes, I am praying, and this physical body is expressing her experience at the same time. Yes, I'm tending to the holy and the responsibilities of everyday life and the to-do list and the, oh, don't forget to tell so and so something or other shows up. I go, can we include that? Not to move our focus away from the prayer, but to allow the thoughts and sensations and the realities of everyday life accompany us. Because When we're doing everyday life and we're driving to the donut shop and we're having a conversation with the donut master about who the donut is for today, and we're handling cash ducats to pay for said donut, or at least to leave a fat tip, that we are accompanied by prayer. We don't get annoyed with it then, do we? While I'm fishing $5 and $10 bills out of my wallet, I'm going like, oh, Allah. And I don't go, oh, Allah, go away. I'm not doing you right now. No way. So we tend to all of it as much as we can. And sometimes we're putting our focused attention on one side or another of it, and that's fine. So keep bouncing back and forth and tending to the things that need to be tended to. Seek balance as much as we possibly can in these things. Now, at the same time, Murshid would say, because most of our lives we neglect the spiritual life, then we need to really put more concerted energy toward the spiritual life. Not because it is more important or because we should neglect the outer life, but because the outer life asserts itself much more forcefully into our consciousness and into our activity. So we need to bring our concerted effort more diligently to the inner life. Okay, that was 10 minutes just on that. And I don't think I even said anything. Student teacher relationship. The student teacher relationship is the essence of the Sufi path. It really is like, it's the essence. No, it's the center. No, it's the defining characteristic. No, it's fundamentally important. Take your pick from those phrases. Probably one of them is the right one, and the other ones are just aiming in that direction. I don't believe the Sufi tradition, the Sufi culture, the Sufi philosophy works without the student teacher relationship. At the same time, I immediately have my inner argument, so I'll make it an outer argument for your benefit. Certainly, anyone who is in pursuit of wisdom is on the path of Sufism, whether it's called that or not, and whether it's participating in a particular culture or tradition or set of teachings and practices or not. Anyone who is in pursuit of wisdom is on the Sufi path. So you can take your pick in those things as well. For those of us who choose to engage in a student-teacher relationship, the form and the structure and the energy, the dynamic of that relationship is entirely unique to each person. That I could tell you, I could spend a long time just describing what that is and what it isn't, and then I go, each expression is entirely unique. Every individual person's experience is entirely unique. And that is both the experience of the student and the experience of the teacher, both. It is understood in Sufi culture, I hope that word is a good one for this, that we in our humanness need help to discover the reality of our own soul because we all experience life and ourselves with an endless, not endless, a vast series of veils, of obscurations, of distractions, of confusions, of conditioning, of the the natural and imposed forms of the nafs. And I I don't know about you. I barely know about me. I do not trust my own self-assessment. I am smart enough, humble enough, honest enough to know that I am tricky. The ego is tricky. the conditioning and the expressions and the layers of motive, of wounding, of desire, of every facet of this humanness, they all contribute to a lens through which I see the world and I see myself. That's true for all of us, every single one of us. And the teacher-student relationship fundamentally helps us, if we utilize it in this way, it helps us to clear the obscurations, or at least to find a different perspective, a different lens, a different way of understanding and catching a glimpse of ourselves. Some of those things are really gentle and loving, and some of them are brutal and painful. And it's not for the purpose of being brutal and painful, it's for the purpose of truth through love. There are so many things about how we're navigating inner and outer life and paying attention to the guidance, the God presence, the instruction, and also the personal will and desire. And these themes Murshid spoke about a lot and emphasized these two ideas, words that are kaza and qadr, that is the divine will and the human will. And that is the God capacity to know all things and do all things, and the human limited but still massive capacity to participate in that. And there are all kinds of ways that each of us can discern what is it that is the God will and what is it that is the ego motive or the ego will, the limited self will. And we can, in our cute humanness, do lots of things just because we want to, regardless of whether the divine wills it or wishes it or not. And we can accomplish things just based on our own human will and human power. But it's going to be much more better if we do it paying close attention and looking for the harmonizing potential of inviting the divine will, the divine intention, the divine purpose, the divine guidance, and looking for the ways that those meet and merge and that we can participate in that beautifully. Even then, that doesn't mean that everything will be easy. There are often things that we understand very clearly to be divine will and that are very hard work for us because we need to overcome the lower nafs voice or the conditioning and wounding and resistance that showed up in several of the things that you all brought today. That is, how do we understand what is ego resistance to the divine? I'm not sure if that was exactly the phrase that someone brought, but something like that. That we spend so much of our lives resisting and pushing against and denying and ignoring and um, getting sucked into the demands and the assertions of the smaller self. So that ties into uh, the question about how do we understand, how do we recognize what is actually divine guidance, what is intuition, and what is ego? And Murshid also talked a lot about those things. Divine guidance is not interested in our personal preferences and aversions. That's the bottom line. Divine guidance has no interest at all in our personal preferences and aversions. So if what we think we're hearing, thinking, feeling, wanting, doing, if it is tied, beholden to our personal preferences and aversions, you can bet your ass that's not divine guidance. Hopefully, for a lot of us, especially if we are really pursuing a life that is led by our ideals, that is by our moral compass, our sense of fortitude and integrity and love at the center, chances are pretty good that there's going to be a solid overlap in the Venn diagram of divine will and personal will. Was that too many complicated words? Mixed messages from your head movements. We are encouraged, invited, and really generously resourced to pursue wisdom, to really strive to see and understand clearly and cleanly the reality, the nature of life, of our own humanness, and through those explorations to understand God. If we are pursuing that instruction with honor and love, chances are pretty good that what we wish will be aligned with what God wishes. In the Sufi path, that includes, really requires a lot of unlearning, a lot of stripping away of the outer forms and the immediate aspects of our conscious desires, wishes, motives. That's the dissolving, it's the nafkhashi, that is the annihilating of the false self. In order to emerge and awaken to the real. When to wait and when to push. That sounds exactly like birth, doesn't it? When to wait and when to push. This really, it's such an excellent theme. This shows up in so many ways, um, and it's really necessary for every aspect of growth, of movement, of accomplishment, of progress, that there are periods of waiting and there are periods of pushing. There are periods of rest and there are periods of growth. And and we are invited to really understand what it is that's called for in each moment. And it changes. It changes day to day, hour to hour, month to month, year to year, and person to person. So there are these qualities of Rouge and Javal that are, you can find these in lots of Sufi teachings, including Murshid. That is when the energy is rising and when the energy is falling. When there is a robust movement forward, a dynamic power energy, and when there's a receptivity and a recuperation, um, and we can try to push the tides, but we're not going to be very successful. So it's again looking for those overlaps, those moments and points of connection where the energy of life, the instruction is rising, and our energy rises to meet it, that we jump on that wave and ride it. And we can pay good attention and really learn with keen awareness what those qualities are within ourselves. And we can pay close attention to recognize the qualities that are expressing naturally in life around us. I want to come back to something that came up. At least three of you today mentioned this thing about loving the self, loving myself, love myself, love myself. And I immediately go, which self are you loving? We're in a mode, in a culture, in a moment in uh, our societal process where there's a lot of celebration and permission and encouragement toward indulging, accepting, and uplifting all of the most wounded places and dysfunctional aspects of the self. And while there is a lot of gentleness and sweetness in Sufism, it is also important to have the the sword of discernment to know which aspects of self do we want to empower and uplift and celebrate and perpetuate, and which aspects of self really need to be reined in and disciplined and managed and healed and subdued and understood, recognized with a light of truth, so that we can come into a more beautiful expression, a more wholesome evolution. That Mersha described this so often as finding the thorns in our own personality that prick and removing them. Removing the thorns in our own personality. That's the work of the Sufi. So, love the capital S self. Understand the lower S self so that you can invite it to participate authentically and truly in a healed, healthy, and glorious way in the capital S self. Okay, I'm going to shift tracks in a big, big way for a moment, or maybe for 5 minutes or so, to get to this theme that I think is really important and kind of more pragmatic, maybe, about progressing on the path. How to progress, wishing to progress, wanting to understand what that means and how to do it. Um, there are all kinds of problems in human structured organizations that are designed with particular intentions, but that somehow fall into very interesting forms of competition and comparison and aspiration and materialism, spiritual materialism, and ambition, uh, and because all of these things just naturally become part of any human structured organization, it gets very interesting to see. But what's the essence here? What is it actually about that is beyond the forms and the observable details? So, informationally, Piro Murshid Inayat Khan, he really structured a Sufi order with lots of details and lots of curriculum and lots of systems of development and progress. And he designed things so meticulously in order to entrust them to teachers and representatives and people in various places in the world so that those people would have a good, solid resource, a set of practices and systematized formula for inviting, offering, welcoming, um, supporting communities and individuals on the Sufi path. This is, try to imagine back to 115 years ago, okay, 110 years ago. When Murshid was doing this, it was unheard of. Like, this was not something that you could just go to your local bookstore and find a book with this information. And you couldn't get on a Zoom to talk about these things, right? He was really creating infrastructure, a container, a vehicle for the message, and trying to give every possible tool and resource to make that sustainable, maintainable, and useful for generations to come. And he did a fantastic job. He did an amazing, spectacular job. Thank you, Murshid. Now, some of these things were him going and giving lectures and talks in public places and initiating dozens of people at the end of a lecture. And he would have people just lined up, and he would give initiation after initiation after initiation, one person after another. I, and actually, I have been present with Pir Zia, who is holding one of the lineage orders of Inayat Khan. And I've been with him where he did a weekend workshop, and that was like days of a couple lectures and practices and meditations and whatnots in here in Colorado. And at the end of this, and many times during the course of the weekend, he said, at the end of this weekend, if anyone wishes to be initiated, I'll give you information about where to go and who to talk to be able to come and be initiated at the end of this weekend. So at the end of the weekend, there was a whole lot of us went to another local Sufi teacher's house, and there was a big crowd of people just like mushed into the living room, and 7 people sat side by side in front of Pir Zia while he did an initiation for all of them at the same time. That's one way to do it. That's how Pir Zia did it. Now, at the same time, he did the initiations and then said, now, all of you who were just initiated, find a guide. Bye. There were a few people in the room who did function as guides in that order. And So he could give people resources and be like, here are some options for local guides. Please connect with one of them. That's not actually an unusual way for Sufism to work, for initiations to work, for the beginning of the path to work. Now, Inayat Khan, well, he did that sometimes as initiations. He set up a curriculum that included, when people are interested in Sufism, give them this set of papers called the Gothikas for candidates, or the social Gothikas. It's 73, 74 pages of a lot of information about Sufism. That's introductory. That's like, this explains what the Sufi path is about, what's important, what the values are, how it works. After someone is initiated, they're invited to participate in Gatha's classes, which is reading these other sets of papers. It's a 3-year program of written curriculum and contemplation with the guidance, with the facilitation of a teacher. 3 years of Gathas, which is 3 sets of Gathas and 10 papers in each of those sets that are done over the course of 3 years. Murshid described that after each year, a murid, a student, an initiated student, would be given the next level of initiation. You do 1 year, 1 set of gathas, and then you're initiated to the second. Then you do the second year, second set of gathas, and you're initiated to the third. Third year, third set of gathas, and you're initiated to the fourth. Then you have 3 years of the Gitas. That's another set of papers that some of us are studying right now. 3 years, 3 initiations, 3 sets of study and contemplation with the facilitation of a teacher. After the Gitas, there's the Sangatas. That's another 3 years, another 3 initiations. The way that Murshid did this, it was very meticulous, very systematic, so that people could engage in things and know where they're at and be encouraged onward. That he did describe that giving the initiations is an acknowledgement that helps people feel recognized and encouraged to continue on. It keeps people engaged. And part of that is satisfying the ego desires. At the 9th, no, going back, no, going forward. There are different orders that do things differently. So I'm like, should I go back and say other things? No, I'm just going to continue. Okay. So the 9th is the level of completion of study. And it's called Sufi. So at the 9th level, someone is initiated as a Sufi. That is saying, good job. You've learned the things, you've integrated the things, you understand what the path is, you've done the practices, you've been doing this for 9 years. Fantastic. You are now complete and free from your obligation to the order, and you can go forth and live your life and share it and do what's yours to do. And you're empowered and blessed. Beyond that, Murshid also gave the 10th, that is the level of initiation, that is the Sheikh or the Khalif. After that is the 11th, which is the level of the Murshid. And after that is the 12th, which is the Pir. Now, Inayat Khan, in his lifetime, initiated 4 Murshids, and that's all. 4 Murshids, and they were all women. 4 Murshidas. Putting an A on the end of Murshid makes it distinctly feminine. A Murshida is a feminine Murshid. That's all. 4 murshidas in his lifetime. Okay, that's the process that Murshid laid out for levels of initiation. Different Sufi orders have approached these things in different ways for different purposes, and they're messy. In a lot of them, they're very messy. And like I said, we fall into ego motive and um, competitive comparison, ambition, none of which should be part of the Sufi path, but they are because we're human. Um, what one of you described, some of us playfully refer to as getting poofed. That is when someone comes and says, "Oh, you're a teacher now." Poof. And with no particular preparation and no particular warning and no particular, like, did I go through all the things? Who cares? Like, there you go. So, uh, and some teachers, including Vilayat and Hidayat, the two sons of Pir Murshid Inayat Khan, were renowned for poofing people. And others. Moinuddin, I have heard several stories about Moinuddin doing that. Pir Moinuddin, who is the successor of Murshid Sam, that is 2 generations under Inayat Khan. That there seems to be sometimes I think that people getting poofed is actually tremendously legitimate and well earned, and it's a teacher really recognizing someone's capacity, understanding, integration, and that the appropriateness of that. And sometimes I think that it has been done kind of recklessly and prematurely for other motives in other directions. Um, but that's up to each order does things in their own way, and the teachers that are empowered in each of those orders can make their own decisions on that in the ways that feel right and good for them. How to progress, then? Um, Ask your teacher. The how to progress for each person is completely unique. That there are courses of study, there are practices, there are things you can read and contemplate, and there are levels of initiation that each order handles in their own way. And if the people who brought that up on this call, I believe with the entirety of my being that it would be entirely appropriate and wonderful for you to ask your teacher for the support, the guidance, the encouragements, the resources to be able to move onward and upward in the way that exactly right for you. You're probably ripe, ready, and overdue. If you're wondering whether it's time to wait or push, it's time to push. So Inayat Khan only designated 4 murshidas. At the time of his death, none of those murshidas took responsibility for the Sufi order as he had formed it for all kinds of interesting reasons. Well, because of one or two not very interesting but disturbing reasons, my opinion. Um, there are all kinds of ways in Sufi traditions that people are given acknowledgement, empowerment, uh, titles, and distinctions. And sometimes that happens through the direct line of succession through a particular teacher in a particular order. And sometimes that happens because people branch off and start their own things. And that happens a lot, um, including Inayat Khan. He was not designated a murshid by his teacher either. That he was given his instructions and went and got to work and put the titles and forms and structures in place that he felt were necessary, useful, and appropriate for the context that he was working in. Um, The question specifically was about Murshid Sam. So Murshid Sam started a new Sufi order, and it was not with the specific explicit instruction from his first Sufi teacher, Inayat Khan. It was, um, I don't know how much story to give you. I don't have a lot of time. Murshid Sam first was working with Murshida, one of the four Murshidas, Rabia Ada Martin. She was the first murid of Inayat Khan and the first Murshida, and most of us believe that she was designated to carry the lineage. Um, that didn't end up happening per se. But Murshid Sam worked with Rabia for another 30 years, I think, after Inayat Khan's death. I'm not exactly sure about the time frame, so don't quote me on those dates, but about 30 years after Inayat Khan died, Murshid Sam continued to work alongside Rabia as a support to her in her responsibility. After Rabia died, Murshid Sam started doing other things, and he ended up another 10-ish years later working with Vilayat. Vilayat also was not given the distinction of a peer. He claimed that himself when he branched off from the Sufi movement and started the Sufi order. That's what he called it at the time. That's what they were called at the time. Murshid Sam was working with Pir Vilayat in harmony, that um, they were sharing their work for a while. And when they hit some irreconcilable differences, Murshid Sam went off and started the Sufi Islamia Ruhaniyat Society. That's what he called it to begin with, the Sufi Islamia Ruhaniyat Society. And he was given that name for the organization by his, at the time, Pakistani Sufi teacher, Barkat Ali. And he was told that he could do this and he could call it this. And so that was the beginning of what is now called the Ruhaniyat, affectionately. Like that's the familiar name for it. But um, Sufi Ruhaniyat International is the formal name for it now. It's taken a couple different iterations. Um, it is common when a new Sufi order is established for it to be to request the blessing, the acknowledgement of some Sufi peers, some sheikhs, caliphs, the leaders of other Sufi orders that can go, yep, good job, get to work. You have my approval and my blessing. And um, so that's not unheard of, as we know. All right. Because someone asked me about this very recently, I'm happy to go through this timeline that Salim had put. We're not going to do it right now, but Salim put together a timeline based on things that I've described and mapped out, and then further research about what are all of the Sufi orders that have taken wings from the teachings of Inayat Khan. And there are a lot of them. And so seeing it all mapped out on a timeline and what they're called and who's leading them and having some sense of how they came into being is maybe that's interesting for some people. But for right now, in our last 3 minutes together, there was a conversation piece about peak experiences, about the things that are revealed, about the things that we understand when not understand, that we know and we are, and that we just rest in or touch into those peak experiences. And then when we come back into our normal everyday life, normal everyday consciousness, that those things seem to disappear. And we want to be able to keep them. There is some hunger to be able to keep those things. And that's not the nature of the spirit. I'm sorry. but it's not. So, in Sufi terms, they're referred to as hal and maqam. That hal is the momentary peak experience that I think all of us probably have at least one or two of those, of just like we stop existing. There is nothing but the one. We're completely dissolved in God reality, and everything is perfectly clear and perfectly one. And um, that's an imperfect way of describing it, but you know, those moments. And then we come back and be like, dang, here I am again. Oh, I'm still here. Okay, not necessarily. Now, the everyday mode of how we experience life is the maqam. So it is said that that is the station and the hull is the state. So we have the station and the state. The hull, the peak experiences are awesome. And we do strive for them and long for them. Um, and it is not natural for us to live there all the time, that we get those glimpses. And those glimpses inspire us and energize us to do the nitty gritty work of developing the soul, of tending to the inner life, of really cultivating that clear, lasting, ongoing relationship of understanding the self and understanding God. Also, there's the question of, haven't I been given enough? And there's also the, I am no longer striving for peak experiences. Both of those things showed up in here. And I'm no good at remembering the specific names of these beings, but there are two beings, Sufi people, individual human beings. And there's a question that shows up in some Sufi stories about which one of these is better. And one of them is said to have tasted one drop of the ocean of the divine reality and being completely satisfied with that one taste of one drop. And the other is drowning in the sea of divine reality, is completely inundated and can never get enough. So, which of those is better? Whichever way is right for you, darlings.